I think the problem with recording back-to-back episodes like this, because we're doing 3 in a row, or we're going to try and do 3 in a row here, and this is number 2, right? The problem with that is that you can't use up all your funny anecdotes in episode 1. You gotta like spread them out over the, here in this case, 3 episodes.
I think funny anecdotes is a generous term to describe me moaning about my FPL team in the last one.
Mildly entertaining anecdotes, can we go with that?
And the Sainsbury's debacle.
Hell yeah. No, that was cool. That was a good funny anecdote. I thought that was funny. I didn't know that about you, the grape theft thing. So
do you have any more funny anecdotes for this episode, or are you spent?
It's so hard to demand funny anecdotes on the spot.
True.
I can't believe you've done this to me.
Sorry.
I don't know if I have anything loaded ready to go.
No, that's fine. I don't either. I just thought the way that you started this podcast by complaining about having to space your funny anecdotes over the podcast would imply that you had one in the barrel.
Yeah.
Ready to go. But
that was my funny anecdote.
Right, I see.
Yeah. That I was running out of funny anecdotes.
Sorry.
Thanks for the laugh. Yeah, that was a fake laugh. So yeah. All right. Any more funny anecdotes, or do you want to dive straight in on this one?
No, I want to talk about ROI.
Okay. Is that a funny anecdote?
I'm chomping at the bit to talk about return on investment when it comes to emails.
Okay, let's do it. Let's talk about that. Okay, so ROI for email marketing. And firstly, let's just specify what we're talking about when we're talking about email marketing. I think that's the most important thing. My feeling is, I didn't really know when I said that whether that was a question to you or if that was just a statement.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were doing a self-sell.
No, I wasn't. Well, I didn't know what I was doing, to be fair. I just said it and then it hung there. I think what we're talking about is opted in. Well, I know what we're talking about. Opted in email marketing. We're talking about newsletters. We're talking about CRM. And we'll touch on a little bit here. We'll talk about B2B a little bit. We'll also talk about D2C, CRM. Yeah. And some of the differences and what we should expect as an ROI for email marketing. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely first-party data that we're talking about here. And we've already talked about the importance of first-party data in a previous episode. Yeah. We're not talking about the opposite of that is cold emailing, which is a completely different conversation, particularly when it comes to ROI, and one that we won't be touching on today. So this is for those of you who have your list and are thinking to yourself, is it worth my time emailing these people? Am I actually going to get anything for my efforts? Because I think that's one of the big stumbling blocks, isn't it, Jamie, for certainly our prospective clients, and a lot of the conversations that you have in that sort of pre-working with us phase are around ROI and what marketing managers, business owners can expect to get. And you've rightly pointed out that can look very different depending on whether you're B2B or whether you are D2C. So if you're an e-commerce store, perhaps it's a lot more obvious why you would want to be emailing your list compared to if, for example, you're selling a service to other businesses.
Okay. So before we talk about the return, let's talk about the investment. So I think in terms of like setting the scene here, let's cover each thing separately. So firstly, let's talk about B2B newsletters and what someone should expect to invest in order to get that started up. Because you mentioned there that there might be someone who has a list that's debating whether emailing them is worth the time, the investment of time and resources.
Yeah.
There's also people that might be listening, or that don't have a list yet, and they're considering whether to invest in building that list, because that's more high effort than just, already having a list. So, what kind of investment are we talking about here? So let's paint the picture. We have a business which is a B2B business. So that might be an agency of some sort. It might be, marketing, creative, web agency. It might be a solicitor's. It might be a law firm, accountants. You might be in manufacturing and you're selling products that are specifically for other businesses, or you might be offering services to other businesses. What kind of investment do those firms need to make if they are starting from zero?
So I think there are two resources that are being spent when you're building an email list, and indeed when you're then subsequently sending stuff to that email list. The first is time. That's the big one. And so there's lots of time that needs to be invested into building an email list. I don't want to get into a conversation about the various ways in which you can build your email list, because that is an episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
But everything, suffice to say, all 16 methods that we outline in our list growth playbook, which we might have mentioned before, go to our website and you can get it for free. Every single method requires some investment of time. The second key resource is money. And some of the methods that we recommend involve spending money as well. For example, you could run a paid ads campaign to promote your newsletter, and you would end up with a cost per subscriber, and that can be a viable method of building your list as well. I would say that theoretically it's very possible to build your list without spending money. It is impossible to build a list without spending time, and I suppose if you invest more of one, you have to invest less of the other, if that makes sense. So if you're spending more money on list acquisition, you can save yourself time. If you're spending more time on list acquisition, you can save yourself money.
Nice. Okay. If we break down the component parts of what someone might need to do and spend time and money on in those very early stages. So we have the email platform. You might have a free version, and I would encourage anyone to start on a free version first and then scope out what the additional costs will be once you start to scale your email efforts. So there's that platform. And I'm guessing, after the free version, you might be spending, I don't know, £30 a month or something for, a half decent platform, which will then scale with the amount of contacts that you're sending and the amount of emails that you're sending to him. You might want to, or you will want to, create a sign-up form on your website. You might have the capability to do that in-house, so you're just spending time doing that. Or you might need to contact your web people and they'll do it for you, and then you end up spending a little bit of money perhaps on getting that put in place. So we have a sign-up form, we have an email platform. I think most of the things that happen from that point onwards, having spent a bit of money, is investing time. Building an email template, writing the content, and promoting your newsletter through organic channels to build your email list.
Yeah, agreed. Once you've got your email list, and I suppose this is that, there's pre-email list where more time and money is needed to build one. There's post-email list, which is you have a healthy number of subscribers, and that number, by the way, is incredibly variable depending on what you're selling and who you're selling to. A list of 50 really high intent people could be way more valuable than a list of 10,000, depending on the product you're selling. If you're selling private jets, 50 private jet buyers is super valuable and well worth sending emails to. So there is some relativity when it comes to what constitutes a healthy list and how easy it is to acquire those subscribers as well. But once you have that, email marketing is really cheap. And I think this is how you end up with these crazy figures that you sometimes hear that will say things like email marketing yields an average of like a 38-1 ROI. Because, part of the reason why that is yes, of course, email marketing is effective, but it's also because once you've got the list in place, email marketing is cheap, right? You can theoretically do it, as you've said, Jamie, for next to nothing. Once you've set up those fundamentals, all right, you need to pay for a piece of email marketing software, which, depending on how big your list is and depending on the complexity of what you want to do, it could cost as little as £30 a month. That's very cheap on the grand scheme of things, particularly given you get to contact such a high quality audience for that price. So that is a key pillar of this episode, is to think about the fact that, okay, it doesn't actually cost you that much to start. Okay, there are levels of sophistication here that might require more investment further down the line, but to just start and start landing in the inboxes of people that have purchased from you before, or who want to hear from you, or could end up purchasing from you at some point, is pretty affordable.
And I think you can sustain that level of investment for quite some time, I think, as well. So when we think about then scaling up further, obviously the fees associated with your email platform will scale with the size of your list. So we have to consider that. But if we start to make more of an investment in money, I think we're then talking about upscaling our email effort, not just storing more people and sending to more people. So when we start to think about, okay, well, we want to add in some more advanced kind of CRM stuff here. And I would say, if you have the time and money to invest in it, getting those fundamentals in place earlier is a good idea. If you want to kind of grow into your email efforts, wait until you've got 2,000, 3,000, or, somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 people on your list, and then start to think about, okay, well, now I'm seeing some traction with this. I want to upscale it, increase my investment, and start to put in some CRM elements where, I'm thinking about how people are entering my email lists in different ways. And so I want to tailor their experience with my newsletter based on that. And their relationship with me might be different, and so I'm tailoring the experience with my newsletter and my email efforts based on the relationship they have with me.
Yeah, really, that level of sophistication is a judgment call that needs to be made by you, because it's all well and good us saying, and I like it, Jamie, because you've given something objective there, which is 2,000 to 5,000. I'd say that's a good number for most businesses, particularly in the B2B space. But you might decide that it's worth your while, depending on what you're selling. If you're selling a really high ticket item, let's say you're selling a service that's £100,000 a year, it might be worth your while to send an email to every individual who clicked on a button that you included in your last campaign. That might only be 5 people, but depending on what you're selling, depending on who those 5 are, you might think, actually, I'm going to follow up with each one of these personally. And so that level of sophistication, yes, 2,000 to 5,000 is when we can start seriously talking about segments and high quality testing and all of that good stuff. But the point that you reach that sort of that point where it's worthwhile for you to invest extra time could be sooner.
And it could be sooner. And I think if we think about our email list slightly different, let's frame our email list slightly different, because people might think, okay, well, I've got 100 people on my email list, and that's not very much, and it's not really worth writing content for and spending time with. I would challenge that. And if we frame how we think about those 100 people differently, these people have essentially bought a ticket to be on your email list. And the price that they've paid for that ticket is their data and permission to email them. And let's imagine that those 100 people on your list are 100 people stood in a room, and that you have free agency to speak to them about whatever you want. Okay, and so obviously it's not, the message isn't going to be as powerful as if you were stood in a room with those 100 people. But if we picture those 100 people as 100 people stood in a room, all of a sudden, okay, well, now it is worth speaking to 100 people. If I was organising an event and I was on stage and I was saying, okay, well, there's 100 people in the room, I would say, okay, well, this is worth my time speaking to these 100 people. And if we think you said there, 5 people might click on a button out of those 100 people, we have a 5% click rate, which is very, very healthy. Click-through rate would be lower, or higher. Sorry, it would be higher.
Yeah, it would be higher, yeah. Unless you've got 100% opens.
Yeah, unless you're 100% opens. Sorry, my maths wasn't mathing there. it would be higher. But if we think about 5 people clicking, okay, then I've delivered my talk in this room to 100 people. And then after the event, 5 people came up to me and spoke to me specifically about what I was speaking about on stage. So people are taking that next step of engagement, involvement with my content or what I've said, and they've shown some intent by coming and talking to me. So obviously, the impact of standing in a room, talking to people, and then having 5 people come and talk to you after, the impact of that on your business is much higher than what I'm talking about here. So it is relative, but I think it is helpful to frame, adopt that perspective for our email list and say, well, 100 people are, 100 people is worth talking to.
Yeah, I totally agreed. I think that's a really nice way to look at it. And so based on that, your investment, and I think we should move on to the return momentarily, but your investment is a sliding scale based on your the chances of meaningful return, which nicely segues us into return, Jamie, because this is maybe one of the trickier aspects of selling the service that the Inbox Club does, right? Because we mostly work with businesses in the B2B space, and it's not always obvious what the return is going to be for the business that wants to start sending weekly or monthly newsletters, in the same way that maybe it's more obvious if you're an e-commerce store who wants to start emailing your list. So I suppose my first question for you, Jamie, is when you're having a conversation with a prospective client at the Inbox Club and they say, what am I actually going to get? Like, what is the net result going to be if I send a weekly email to my list? What's your answer?
It's a question that I get asked almost every time. I think we talk about some of the key questions that people give us every time we speak to them about newsletters, and send frequency is one of them. And we've talked about some of these before, but what can I expect from the efforts I'm expending? And in the case of engaging us as an agency, the money that I'm spending, what can I expect as a return on that? And it's something that I won't answer. There's not like a simple answer for that. My answer is usually a challenge, in that I ask the question back and say, okay, well, if we sit down in 6 months and this has been a success, what does that look like? And then what happens then is that the person that I'm speaking to is starting to create the expectations on themselves, by themselves. And because they're doing that, that gives me the ability to say, okay, those things that you've set out there are definitely achievable. I don't know if I'm explaining this very succinctly, but usually what people say when I ask that question back is, I would like engagement metrics to be good. I want my list to be showing me some signs of life. I would like some replies. I would like to hear that, the newsletter is good. And at some point, I would like the newsletter to contribute to the conversion of a client in the next, I don't know, we're talking about a time scale of months and, a year here or whatever. And so a conversation I had yesterday with someone who said, what is the ROI in running a newsletter? I think that is difficult to answer directly, because we have to think about, okay, we might be sending a newsletter monthly, or we might be sending it weekly, or we might be spending more meaningful time and money on acquisition and list growth, or we might not be. The proposition and the content of our newsletter might be good, or it might be shit. The proposition of our business might be good, or it might be shit. So we have to think about all of these things that contributing to what the ROI of a newsletter will be. And what I'm doing here is a very salesman way of not answering the question directly. But I think a very helpful way to frame this is, okay, newsletters and CRM, email marketing, they sit smack bang in the middle to the end of funnel. Okay. So we have to put the efforts in to service the top of the funnel in acquisition and in awareness, getting people through that stage into our email list, and then nurturing them to the point where they'll convert. And everything we do, especially as B2B businesses, everything we do contributes to that eventual conversion. We're talking about our branding. We're talking about the touch points through different social media platforms. We're talking about our email marketing efforts. We're talking about when we might meet these people or speak to these people outside of, those platforms. We might be talking about us coming up in conversation. So we're thinking about all these touch points, and the stats are it takes 7 or 8 touch points to eventually convert someone. So what we're doing when we're running a newsletter is giving ourselves a much higher chance of ticking off some of those touch points and eventually getting the conversion when that person is in the magical 5% ready to buy B2B buyers. When they are in that space, they know where to come. That's my salesman answer to what can I expect as an ROI.
Yeah, that's nice. No, I like it. And I think there's a few things that you've touched on there that I'd like to unpack. So I think, firstly, what we're talking about here is attribution and its flaws. I think when it comes down to it, I don't even know if this is an argument that needs to be argued anymore, because I think most people, particularly if you work in marketing or you run a business, you are smart enough to recognize that the way that people make purchasing decisions, whether that's to buy, a new mug for your tea every morning, or whether it's to engage an agency for a 6-figure annual contract, most people recognize that there's a multitude of touch points required in order to get someone over the line. You've said 7 or 8 there. I'd argue that depending on the service, it could be much, much higher. And that actually you need something akin to a relationship with the organization you want to buy from. For some products, you don't necessarily need a relationship with the mug seller, but you probably do need a pre-existing relationship with the agency you're going to use for the next couple of years. And I agree with you. I think newsletters are a great way to cultivate that relationship. So this idea of ROI, if we're sort of reducing it down to its most sort of bare essentials, it's very, very difficult. If you've come to this podcast and you're hoping that we'll say you can expect to get 4 new clients a year by sending out a monthly newsletter, it's just impossible to quantify that, because very rarely do you send out a newsletter that someone replies to and says, I'm ready to become a client. They might read the newsletter and then 6 months later, having come across you on LinkedIn and bumped into you at an event, might eventually end up converting. When we think about D2C, it's slightly different, because a lot of the software used to run email marketing for D2C businesses will try to give you an exact revenue figure for the amount that your emails are producing. But even in those systems, attribution is incredibly flawed. So if we take Klaviyo as the example, Klaviyo is, I suppose, the default platform for a lot of e-commerce stores who want to take email marketing seriously. It's a great platform. It allows you to do loads of cool stuff. But Klaviyo's default attribution is a 5-day window from an open or a click. So just to give you a real world example of that, Jamie, if I send out an email on day 1 and someone opens it on day 2 and then goes on our social media, speaks to a friend about the brand, etc., and ends up buying on day 5, Klaviyo gets that attribution, even though there are various other things that happened in between them opening the email and going on to make the purchase. So even Klaviyo, for all of its email science, is a relatively flawed system and doesn't necessarily factor in the weird and wonderful ways in which people buy products these days. People look at reviews, people go to TripAdvisor, or they go to, they look at testimonials, they speak to their friends, all of these things that are untrackable for the most part. So yes, it's incredibly difficult to measure a direct ROI, which is why, Jamie, going back to your politician's answer, about what you would say to a prospective client, I think you're bang on, because ultimately we do have to look at the softer stuff. We have to look at email as one part of a mosaic of ways in which someone might end up buying. And I suppose our argument as email marketers is that the particular tile of email marketing is maybe slightly bigger than some of the others, and it contributes more meaningfully to the overall picture.
Yeah. I think, it's important here to just paint that picture of the funnel again, and we want to make sure that we're active in areas that are along that funnel. So we're thinking about what's at the top, what's in the middle, and what's at the end of the funnel, and making sure that we're active in all of those areas. But you're right to single out D2C and e-commerce and consumer CRM, because the investment will be different as well. I think there'll be a slightly higher investment. Platforms are usually more expensive.
Yeah.
If we're using more advanced CRM platforms like Klaviyo, Omnisend, MailChimp does it as well. And, or maybe something like HubSpot, which, HubSpot is also used for a lot for B2B. Those platforms are more expensive because there's more features and they do more stuff. So we need to be ready for those platforms, is what I would say. We need to be ready to use those features that we're paying for. But there's a higher investment. Perhaps I would argue people that are doing D2C email marketing efforts are probably more likely to engage an agency as well, because it's more complicated, it's more convoluted, and so am I more likely to outsource that. So there's an investment to consider there. And there's more pressure on our acquisition channels in D2C because our sales value is lower, and we rely on more sales than higher ticket B2B businesses. And so there's more pressure required and more investment required on our acquisition channels, say paid media, organic social media, and what PR, whatever it is you're doing at the awareness stage. And because you need the list growth to justify the investment. So it's a different playing field. When we're talking about D2C, e-commerce and consumer-facing CRM, and B2B newsletters and CRM, it's a different playing field. The investments are different, and the return is definitely more trackable when it comes to D2C. Any work that we do in e-commerce, D2C, is there's more pressure on demonstrating a return on investment. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Well, one thing that's definitely worth noting as well is that we've talked about that sort of softer return. There is it may be that you can't necessarily attribute email as the direct reason why you've won a new client, but there are still more concrete metrics we can look at when it comes to ROI, even in the B2B space. And I would say the most obvious example of that is if you are linking to something that's not a buy our services page. So if, for example, you're hosting an event and wanting to sell tickets, or you are hosting a free webinar, or you've got a blog post that you want people to read, those things, we can get a very clear idea of how much email contributes towards the publicity of those things and the traffic that's sent that way. Again, depending on your list, the extent of your return will vary significantly. But we have some clients, B2B clients, that have lists of 6,000 or 7,000, and invariably, if we include a link to an event they're charging for, we will see a clear uptake, and we can attribute those conversions. So there are, I suppose, there's the big return, right, which is winning the client or whatever it might be. But then there are smaller micro returns as well that are impervious to algorithmic whims. Try promoting an event on LinkedIn and see how you get on. It's much, much harder. But through email, we can do this. So I want to mention that as well, because yes, you're not going to get an answer from us that says you will get X number of clients per year if you're sending emails every week. But what we can say is that, yes, your metrics will report on things like how many people clicked this button that links to an event you're hosting. And that data is definitely a return.
Nice. I really like that point. I really like that point, because then we aren't putting as much pressure on selling and converting on the spot, but instead thinking, again, going back to that funnel and moving people along it and getting them to engage with the business in other ways. And that's a win. That's a win. That's a return. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about when it comes to ROI of email marketing?
I think it's time for a hot take.
Hot take. Do you know what? I nearly forgot again. I've got to remember.
It's a good job I'm here, man.
I know.
Honestly.
It is a good job. Otherwise, it would just be me talking to the camera for half an hour.
I mean, I'd watch it.
Yeah.
That's why I subscribe to your OnlyFans. So.
Yeah. Okay, hot take. So, have you got one loaded?
No.
Okay, good.
Have you?
I think the hot take is like, we don't plan them beforehand, because we figure if we've been talking about a subject for about 20, 25 minutes, that a hot take will present itself by virtue of having spoken about the subject for 20, 25 minutes. But it doesn't seem to do that.
Okay, whilst you were doing that little ramble, I managed to think of one.
Good. That was what I planned that.
You bought me some time.
Let me just spout some shit for a few seconds, and then James will have a hot take.
I'll do mine first then.
Okay,
my hot take is to stop seeing a return in terms of your ultimate business North Star, and start looking at smaller wins as your return when it comes to email. So that could include stuff like the data you're collecting, the information you're learning about your audience, the click metrics, the engagement rates, and all of those things should be considered a return.
Great. And whilst you're doing that, I thought of my hot take. That's worked quite well, isn't it?
Yeah.
My hot take is, before we start to obsess over the return, think about the level of investment that we're making. Email marketing is quite a low cost channel. It doesn't need to be high cost. So if we think about that in terms of time and money, what the investment is, then all of a sudden there's a lot less pressure on the return. Asterisk, caveat, it's different if you're in e-commerce D2C.
Yeah.
But still, it's not as expensive a channel as, say, putting ads out there.
I like it.
Cool. That wasn't very succinct, but I got there.
Well, we improved, so.
We improved. Before this episode, we were like, right, let's do this one 25 minutes, but bosh, we'll get it done. We're at 32 and a half.
Yeah, we really need to get better at that. But hey, we've still got like another 92 episodes to improve.
Yeah. I think this is number 8. So yeah.
Yeah, I took a leap there. So I guess 91 now.
I just send you the Riverside link every week, and you just turn up and talk about email. That's all it is.
Yeah. Correct.
I might not even been recording any of these, for all you know.
Yeah.
Have you even listened to any episodes on like Spotify or anything yet?
I mean, only so that I'm eligible to leave a review.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Speaking of which, please do if you've listened to this.
Yeah.
As long as it's 5 stars, obviously.
5 stars. Well, please, 5 stars on Spotify. Apparently that really helps. If it's YouTube, then, I don't know, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what podcasters say. I don't know what the...
All right, Mr. Beast, calm down.
Yeah. I might buy TikTok. Thanks for listening. This has been Send Better Emails by Jamie and James at the Inbox Club.
Thank you.